Hey, everybody, it's Dave Cooper. Welcome, welcome, welcome. It's a Monday expert interview, and today's going to be a really interesting conversation as we're going to have Ryan Colker on, and we are going to talk about ICC codes, and not just any ICC codes. We're going to talk about codes that are affecting offsite construction. So before we get into that, and before I bring Ryan into the show, I just want to say thank you to Garcia Strongberg, our sponsor. As you can see in the ticker below, West Palm Beach, Florida. They are architects, designers, and musicians, and you've probably stayed in some of their resorts around the world. They are looking at moving into offsite construction as well. So please check them out, Garcia Strongberg's in West Palm Beach, Florida. All right, so with that said, today's going to be a great day, but first I need you to hit that like and share button right now, please, because we are live on 3 locations: LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook. And if you are not subscribed to our YouTube channel, it really does help us grow what we are doing, grow offsite, because we are continually trying to get the word out there and take over. And I say take over lightly, being a bigger part of this industry, because it's a better way to build. It's a healthier way to build. It's sustainable, and we have an affordable housing crisis. So with that said, let's hop into this. Let's bring Ryan Colker in right now and have this conversation. Ryan, how are you, sir?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. So Ryan, you're down in the DC area, which is a hot spot these days. So we were talking earlier. I'm glad all is going well down there for you.
Yeah, no, things are good here.
Yeah. So this is going to be an interesting conversation, because today we're going to talk about the facts on offsite construction. And Ryan, you're the VP of Innovation at ICC. Why don't you take a few minutes and tell us everything from the time you were born to this very moment in time about your background? Don't leave out any of the good stuff, and just let us know a little bit about how you got from where you are to where you've been to where you are right now.
Yeah, so I'm actually a native Floridian. I know there aren't too many of those my age, but certainly, grew up in South Florida with the specter of, hurricanes and disasters and all that sort of thing, and really had an early interest in environmental issues and really thinking about, the planet and some of the challenges that we needed to address, even back then. And so I ended up going to the University of Florida, go Gators, for an undergrad degree in environmental policy, which was really an interdisciplinary program. So I had classes from, ecology and statistics, some environmental engineering, anthropology. And so it really sort of set me up for understanding how, various different disciplines or sectors, really came together to work towards, a common goal. And then I actually went to law school here in DC at George Washington University, knowing I didn't want to go the regular firm route, but really wanted to be involved in policy that could move the country forward, address some key issues that we needed to address. And so that was really certainly a great experience. From law school, I was at the Renewable Natural Resources Foundation, which was definitely a very interesting experience. In keeping with that interdisciplinary theme, basically they brought together folks from professional and scientific organizations, threw them in a room together to address some key challenges. So, we had civil engineers, landscape architects, wildlife biologists, toxicologists, and sort of everyone came together to address workforce issues or non-point source water pollution, a whole host of different things. And then from there, I moved on to ASHRAE, American Society of Heating, Refrigerating, and Air Conditioning Engineers, in their DC office. So did a lot of work around energy efficiency, sustainability, indoor environmental quality, and really worked to bring the building industry together to support policies in Congress and in federal agencies. From ASHRAE, I moved to the National Institute of Building Sciences, which if folks aren't familiar, NIBS was actually established by Congress to bring the public and private sector together to improve the built environment. So did a lot of work around resilience at NIBS, but also was instrumental in the founding of the Offsite Construction Council, which was really looking for sort of non-biased home of activities within the offsite construction space. So I think many of the folks that have been on your show previously were instrumental in that process as well, including Tom Hardiman, Ryan Smith, Lori Robert, and many others. And so, that's really great hub of information. And then just about 2 years ago, I moved over to the Code Council as Vice President of Innovation. So I get to look at fun things like offsite construction, sustainability, resilience, future of codes, climate risk, those sorts of things. And then I also serve as the Executive Director for the Alliance for National and Community Resilience, which is working on developing benchmarks for communities to really understand where they are on their resilience journey, and what are some of the things that they can do to improve their resilience for their citizens, for the businesses that are located there. And so that's where I currently sit, and really have a fun opportunity to look at a whole host of different things. So right. I really enjoy it.
It's funny. I was just going to say that one of the things before we hopped on, I said, Ryan, do you like what you do? And you actually said, yeah, I really enjoy this. It allows you to do a whole bunch of different things that you really enjoy from, I guess, all the experiences from your past has led you to where you are right now. And it's letting you to bring all this together as you're looking at codes.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think most folks would probably say codes are not the most exciting thing, but I really see them as sort of the intersection of a variety of different things. And it's really, the pathway to get to, things like, offsite construction, addressing affordable housing, resilience, sustainability, all of those pieces.
Yeah, for sure. So let's hop into offsite here. Why right now do you, in the ICC, why are you guys looking at offsite construction? What are you seeing? Can you kind of forecast what you see coming?
Yeah, I think there's a few things that are really driving the conversation within the Code Council. Sort of fundamental to the Code Council's activities is really addressing community needs. So, whether that's safety, affordability of housing, sort of all of those pieces are baked into the DNA of the work that the Code Council does. And so we really recognized that to address a lot of those issues, including, workforce availability issues, affordability, sustainability, productivity, quality and safety, all of those things sort of point to offsite construction as a key strategy. I think one other thing that we really recognized is that code officials can certainly hinder or advance the implementation of offsite construction. And so, through our work with code officials, with code departments, some of the work that we do within our subsidiaries, which, I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about as well. We really have a role to play in, making sure that we can advance offsite construction and the communities that are going to rely on buildings moving forward.
Yeah, sure. And how is the ICC kind of embracing this conversation about offsite construction? It's not their typical norm, and it's starting to become more of their norm to have to look at this and bring it into the code, because the codes were never traditionally written for offsite construction. So it's some big changes that have to be looked at.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as you mentioned, the challenge is really, codes are typically written with, site-built construction in mind. Yet, offsite construction still needs to comply with that. And so, you often run into challenges with local code officials of really just not understanding sort of how the offsite construction process works, or, it's going to take them a little more time to get comfortable with it. And so, through our involvement with code officials, through development of the model building codes, we recognize that there's a real need for, additional guidance, additional resources. And so we're working on developing 2 new standards to support that process. And then also looking across our subsidiaries. So folks may be familiar with NTA, who does a lot of third-party plan review and inspection, certainly heavily involved in the offsite construction industry. But then we also have a couple subsidiaries as well. The ICC Evaluation Service, which looks at different products for whether they comply with the code. Typically for maybe non-traditional products or more finished products that a code official, again, may not be particularly familiar with, but through the work of the evaluation service, they can actually identify and receive a report that gives them a little bit more confidence. And then we have the International Accreditation Service, which accredits for quality control, quality assurance in several aspects of the offsite construction industry, precast, concrete, for instance, panelized steel, those sorts of things. And so looking at all those various different pieces, we saw a real opportunity to sort of bring all those together and really make sure that we can provide the best possible services and products to the offsite construction industry.
Yeah, can you give us a little bit of an insight? So you're working with all these different services, or I guess members or whatever that are out there, like MBI, Tom Hardiman's group, and so forth. Tell us, how does it all come together? How do you start writing codes? How do you collect this information to be able to make intelligent decisions on what the new code should be?
Yeah, so we actually have, I'll say 2.5 processes that we work through. So the model code development process is really open to anyone who wants to propose a change. We're actually ramping up for the development process of the 2024 codes. And so, really anyone who sees need to update the code can actually make a code change proposal for, say, the International Building Code, International Residential Code, International Fire Code. And then it goes through a vetting process where we bring together subject matter experts to sort of work through those changes, with input from stakeholders. And then, the outcomes of that process, again, are, well vetted. And we bring in stakeholders and then the governmental consensus members of the Code Council. So these are the code officials on the ground, go through and decide if things are in the code or not. To really support that process, we actually have a standards development process, which is typically for maybe more technical issues where an open consensus-based, broadly participatory code development process may not be the best avenue for that. And so the standards process actually uses a different consensus-based process to bring together subject matter experts to identify what particular strategies should come together. And so, that's what we're using for 2 new standards, Standard 1200 for the design, fabrication, and assembly of offsite construction, and then Standard 1205 for the inspection and regulatory process. And so folks on that, on the subject matter expert committee include Tom Hardiman from MBI, who's our current vice chair. Dave Tompos from NTA is the current chair. And then we have, architects, manufacturers. I think we have about 5 or 6 state program administrators on the code, on the standard development committee. And so, we basically bring them together and sort of identify best practices.
Yeah, which I think is great. I mean, it's very collaborative, and it's great that we have people like MBI that are in the offsite space working with the other policymakers as well in the industry. So why don't we take a second before we get into the actual facts on offsite construction report that was just released, and why don't we show this short video that you guys put together on your site, so when people come to this, it kind of just gives them a quick overview of why you're doing it. Sound good?
Sounds great.
Let's do that.
As the building industry faces multiple challenges today, offsite construction
Perfect. So yeah, there we have it. I mean, that's exactly it. And I think that the video kind of sums it up pretty well, you know, as far as the direction you guys are looking to take this. And I think having MBI, part of that is a real feather in our cap out here, at least in the offsite volumetric world. So, but this isn't just about offsite volumetric. This includes concrete, steel, and others, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, like I mentioned, we have various different subsidiaries that deal with various different aspects. And so, yeah, we're looking at offsite construction holistically.
Perfect. Perfect. So why don't we jump into this here a little bit? I'm going to pull up what are the facts on offsite construction. I have it blown up on my screen here. And why don't we work our way through and you share with us what this report's all about?
Yeah. So, you know, one of the things that we've certainly recognized is, you know, probably outside of your audience, many folks aren't familiar with offsite construction. They may have seen, you know, some specific products, some projects, but not necessarily really understanding how it works, you know, who's responsible for various different aspects of the process. And then, you know, specifically our code official members, as I mentioned, you know, can be a hindrance, or they can be, you know, great advocates for the offsite construction process. And so we really wanted to provide them, you know, with some information, with some tools to really help them understand how offsite construction works, you know, what are their roles and responsibilities, and really, you know, assure that you know, the community is achieving the same level of safety that they would achieve on a site-built project.
Sure, sure. So why don't we just walk through? I mean, you start off with the basics here. Why is it growing? And then you get into what is offsite construction, prefab, modular, and definitions. And I don't really think we need to jump into that. And most of our audience understands all of that. If I can get to the next page, huh? There we go. You know, so, but I do want to jump into, you know, the component sides of this and the factories, because they're all a little bit different. So how does one look at the codes during a manufacturing process to implement some of these strategies?
Yeah, so I think the biggest difference between you know, the application of various different code provisions is sort of this open versus closed construction. You know, sort of how do things come and appear at the job site? You know, if a local code official can easily sort of dig into, you know, a panel or something like that without, you know, any sort of destruction, you know, then that typically falls to the local jurisdiction to enforce. As I mentioned, you know, ICC the evaluation service, can certainly help as we continue to see, you know, more and more finish on open construction products. But really, when it comes down to closed construction, that's really where, you know, the process changed. You know, it doesn't really make sense for a local jurisdiction to, you know, sort of, you know, approve a full volumetric module or, you know, a pod or something like that that shows up at the job site, where you can't really get into the walls and really see, you know, what's going on with, you know, plumbing and electrical and those sorts of things. Sure. And so that's really where, you know, the regulatory process shifts into the factory. You know, I think one other thing that we've seen from a local jurisdiction perspective is that you know, they need some level of trust that what's going on, you know, within the factory still complies with their, you know, local requirements, and that's where, you know, either a state program or, you know, a third party provider can really provide, you know, that level of assurance. Sure. And so that's really what we're looking at relative to the standards, is to provide some consistency around there, bring some best practices, maybe work with the states that don't currently have industrialized or modular building programs to maybe move forward on establishing them.
And how hard is it to really come up with, you know, where the handoff takes place, right? What was done at the manufacturing facility versus what the local code official can actually start, you know, picking up on. You know, I think that's got to be kind of hard depending on the manufacturer, what type of manufacturing is done, and because they all seem to go to different levels or different extents on what they're willing to do at the factory level. Yeah,
and I think it varies state by state too, as far as, you know, what the state programs approve. So that, you know, certainly creates a challenge. But you have, you know, folks, in the factories to look at all of that, through either third party or state representatives. And so, that's certainly an issue that we're hoping to address, through Standard 1205 is really sort of where is that line?
Sure. So why don't we take a second? Let's say hello to a few people, and then why don't we just dive into Standard 1200 and 1205? This is what we're addressing right now, and then maybe we can jump into those different sections. And if you guys are just joining us right now, please hit that like and share button, and ask questions. Now's your time to ask questions, good, bad, or indifferent, right? Because codes can be a tricky, tough subject for a lot of people, for sure. All right, starting at the top. Jennifer in the background says, welcome to DC Live, Ryan Colker. That was very nice.
Thank you.
All right, we got Jerry McCahey from Integra. Good morning from a relatively chilly Los Angeles. Thanks for joining us today, Jerry. We have Jody Gingas. Good afternoon from Chicago. And I apologize if I didn't get your name right there, but I hope I did. And it's always good to have Mark Bare Naked Willie on. Look at his sunglasses today. We got Canada and the United States. Ryan Colker, great to have you on with the International Code Council. All right. So if you don't know, Mark is on with me. BS Friday, we have a show together, Building Science Fridays. So check it out. You might like it. We talk all kinds of energy and health and how to build better, healthier homes. And then this guy, Tom Hardiman, hello from Charlottesville, Virginia, home of the Modular Building Institute, Modular Home Builders Association, better known as MBI and MHBA. God, I hope I got that right. All right, Adam White, big hello from Cambridge, UK. Thanks for joining us, Adam. Always good to see you. Henry Mickelberg, so many variables, so many questions. Well, Henry, we're waiting for those questions, so let's start having those. If you don't know Henry, Henry has been in this industry a long time. He's actually in France.
Great.
And we got Dr. Brent Musson. Policy piques my interest. I'm sure it does. We're going to get into some of these policies, 1200 and 1205 coming up. And we got Mike Edmonds. Hello, guys, from Mike in the UK. All right. So we got an international-based group, which is important because we'll talk about that a little bit as well, because we have a lot of internationally based companies looking to do business here. And I'm sure, I see that's part of this report as well, at least some of the conversation and topics of how it affects us. So why don't we jump back over and let's start breaking this down. 1200, design, fabrication, and assembly. Why did we start here? Which is kind of self-explanatory to some, but there may be people that really want to understand this. So why don't you walk us through this?
Yeah. So typically, the codes themselves get into the design process. Certainly how various different pieces of construction fit together. And then, assembly is certainly where you can run into a lot of challenges, relative to offsite construction, and really where, code officials, I guess, maybe get a little bit nervous because they see this thing showing up at the job site, and, really how you put it together at the job site is essential to assuring that you're going to get the level of performance that you really anticipate. And so, the 1200 really talks to sort of what are the processes for development of plans. So, how do you demarcate offsite construction elements from things that are going to be done on site? Really provide the information that the state or local regulatory programs need to really understand what was inspected in the factory, what needs to be inspected on site, and so it certainly includes that information. It really identifies who are the responsible parties for various different aspects of the process. So when is it an architect's and engineer's responsibility? When does maybe some aspect of the project fall to the manufacturer? And then what is the role of the local jurisdiction, the state? And so, it goes through sort of the documents that are required for offsite construction, both, volumetric and panelized. And so it certainly splits those out as well. And then it lays out, the criteria for, in-factory inspections. And so, who's competent to be able to do that, and how all of those various different pieces are labeled and those sorts of things. So it certainly goes through the plan approval process, how that works, what the general requirements are. How do you classify how the modules are going to be used? What building type are they in, which certainly influences, the requirements that they need to follow, and really sort of bringing all of those pieces together into one place. Really, hopefully, smoothing the design and fabrication process for offsite manufacturers who, previously, still need to go through the code, but it's in a more sort of accessible way for offsite industry.
I think this is a really important point for people to understand, because as a modular builder, 20 years building modular construction, residential and multifamily, commercial, we all get caught up on, whether it's NTA, PFS, the third parties and the information that they have. But when you really pull back, I guess, the sheets and look at this, you really have to take a look at a whole bunch of different industries and come up with a code that can work collectively within the different groups. Like you said, panelized is different than modular, right? Open versus closed construction and so forth. But there's also some similarities that happen with them as well, I'm sure. So when you're taking account of all this information, I mean, you guys got to have data spreadsheets a mile long, I would think, trying to figure this out. Yeah.
There's certainly a lot of information. I mean, some of these things we've addressed already.
Yep.
We have, I know we're not really talking about relocatable buildings, but there are already, provisions for relocatable buildings in the code. We actually have provisions for tiny houses already in the code. There's a guideline for shipping containers, which I know is a popular building material. So that's available in the code. We have a guideline. Yeah, I mean, now we're to the point of really picking off panelized, volumetric as sort of the next step of things that need to be addressed.
Right. And do you see us ever getting to where a national code on this stuff, or is it all going to be state driven on when they want to adopt or not adopt?
Yeah, it's going to be state driven. Right now the code adoption process is state by state, even locality to locality. Yeah. We're certainly hoping we'll get greater consistency through the use of standard 1205. But at the end of the day, it's still going to be a state and local decision. But the model codes and the standards that we're developing are really intended to, the best we can, provide some uniformity. I think manufacturers moving products across state lines will certainly benefit from that consistency, and hopefully we'll get even more efficiency in the offsite construction process, because we can have that replicability from jurisdiction to jurisdiction.
Yeah, for sure. And then what about the accountability for third parties like NTA? PFS was another one. I'm sure there's a bunch from across the country. How does that process happen to make sure that they have the ability and the knowledge to do these third party inspections based on how the code was written?
Yeah, so actually there are accreditation services that actually review these organizations for their competency, the frequency of quality assurance checks, all of those processes. And right. So our international accreditation service offers that accreditation for third-party providers. There are a couple other organizations that do that as well. As you can imagine, NTA can't get accreditation from IAS as a conflict of interest, but there are other accreditation organizations that do that as well. And so between the accreditation organizations and the requirements that the states set up for these third-party providers, there's that level of assurance there that they're actually qualified to know what they're doing.
Right. And how about the NAHB? Do you do a lot of work with the NAHB? I mean, do they have anybody that's putting any input into the ICC codes?
So the code development process, yeah, NAHB is right there, are participating in the entire code development process. We also work with the Home Innovation Center on a variety of different things, and so yeah, they are very much engaged in the code development process. As far as standard 1200 and 1205, I don't think we have a specific NAHB representative on the committee. But certainly, home builders have contributed, as interested parties, to that process.
Sure, sure. So let's stick with 1200 here for a second, code 1200. What is kind of the biggest advancement out of that entire code that you see for the offsite industry?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing is being able to point to something consistent. We have requirements, in the code that, again, weren't written for offsite construction, yet, manufacturers and designers still need to comply with those. So I think the consistency that standard 1200 provides should really help, smooth that process and really provide code officials with some assurance that, what they are getting is in compliance with the local codes.
Sure, sure. Now let's get to the overseas stuff, right? So anybody that is designing and building overseas, they got to toe the line on the same codes coming over here?
Yeah, exactly. It's, wherever that building is being built, where it's going to sit, you need to comply with those local codes. And so, in an international context, when you have, modules or components coming from, China, Eastern Europe, you still need to have that regulatory process in place. So, in factory inspections to be able to assure that when it gets, to wherever it's going to end up, that it still complies with the local requirements. And so, NTA has folks, in China working with factories there to make sure that, they're meeting the requirements.
Yeah, yeah. So that was going to be my next question. So they have people in different parts of the world. So if a factory has a project, they can probably just call NTA and NTA can make sure somebody's there to inspect.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, cool. I love it. All right, so let's hop into that then. So we're at 1200. Let's talk about 1205, inspection and regulatory compliance, because we're kind of jumping into it already.
Yeah. So, as probably most folks, in the offsite construction space know, there are state programs in about 35 states. And so, they sort of take the burden on, making sure that any offsite construction components meet the local requirements. But, as you can imagine, across 35 states, there's certainly a lot of variation on how, the state actually does it. Do they allow third-party plan review and inspection? Don't they? How are plans submitted? Certainly a wide variation there. And so, standard 1205 is really intended to collect the best practices, from those state agencies and really hopefully provide, some level of consistency and really support, the efficiency that, we hope to gain through the offsite construction process. And then, ideally the states that don't have statewide programs would look to 1205 as sort of their model for standing up those programs. And so, it really sort of walks through the entire process of assuring that, the offsite construction process meets the requirements. And so, it's again, sort of making sure that the plans themselves are, labeled in an appropriate way and really sort of parsing out, is the state responsible for an element? Is the local jurisdiction responsible? Making sure that there are, labels and a chain of custody process, some of the qualifications for third-party inspectors, and really, making sure that sort of all of those pieces are considered in one spot. And so, we don't have, to the great extent practical, sort of, different requirements depending on sort of where you are.
Yeah, for sure. Let's hop to the comments here a little bit, because I have some follow-up questions on what you were talking about as well. Mark had a good comment here. He says, there's more oversight on offsite than site-built. Controlled conditions are beneficial to the process, materials, and installation of the products. I mean, but that's one of the things we often hear in offsite construction is we're held to a higher standard in a lot of instances, or at least a lot more checkpoints. Is that something you guys are having a conversation about?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, we're certainly looking to make sure that buildings comply with the requirements in the local jurisdiction. And I think, certainly through the offsite construction process, you do have sort of more avenues, maybe not through sort of the formal, code official process, but, having quality control procedures, quality insurance procedures, in the factory, certainly looking at, I think Mark mentioned the fact that, you're working in a controlled environment, and so you don't have,
Right.
warping issues and, sort of all of those pieces. So yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, we're really expecting, higher quality, better results from offsite construction. And so, we really need to sort of figure out where that balance is to make sure that, we're giving the offsite construction, industry an opportunity to shine.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Love it. All right, so let's hop in. So Henry Mickelberg, right? We may get our faces covered up. Got a book coming. Here we go. Code is mostly U.S. terminology. Every country and state has its own codes, approval standards. Even in Europe, the disparity in member state standards has been harmonized by ETAs, European Technical Assessments. After years of trying, most countries have their own offsite accreditation systems. BOPAS in the UK, ATEX in France, etc. ISO doesn't even cover global accreditations, although it is probably the best catch-all. Whilst I applaud your intent, I'm struggling to not us.
Okay.
I mean, how to answer that one?
Yeah, I mean, even in the United States, codes are adopted differently, and so we certainly work through that process. But yeah, I mean, there are code standards adopted internationally. I will say in many regions they're actually based off of the I codes, or at least accept projects that are built to the I codes. So Middle East, for instance, is an area where I think we're actually going to see a growth in offsite construction. And fortunately, a lot of their codes are at least compatible, with the international building codes. And ICC actually just opened an office in Dubai. So I think there's, certainly an opportunity in that region. And then, when we talk about Australia and New Zealand, they're often getting, product, offsite components from China as well. And so is there, an opportunity to, facilitate approvals, based off of, the folks from NTA who happen to be in China anyway, inspecting to U.S. standards, could they inspect to, Australian or New Zealand standards? So I think we're increasingly recognizing that this is an international issue, and certainly, again, the most that we can harmonize, across our various different countries, I think the better off we're going to be.
Yeah, perfect. All right, Henry, thank you for that. All right, let's go to Jody Gringus's comment here. She says, my two biggest barriers in placing volumetric modular affordable homes north of Chicago are A, local factories don't want to install automatic sprinklers, which are required by some PFD, and B, codes here exclude NECA section 334, 10 non-metallic sheathed cables, but some manufacturers won't use metal conduit. So this is kind of coming back to what we were talking about earlier, right? All the manufacturers are kind of different on what they'll do, what they won't do in different parts of the country, and that's where I'm saying this becomes very complicated. Or can
it does.
Be,
yeah, it certainly can. I mean, I guess that speaks to just the regular code adoption process. That if jurisdictions can be up to the latest code, uniformity, that
right.
certainly helps that process. Which is then even more amplified in the offsite construction space. But hopefully standard 1200 can help with some of that. But at the end of the day, it's still on sort of the local code requirements, and hopefully getting some consistency there.
Sure. Well, just the fact, like I said, that we're looking at this, we're talking about implementing it into our codes, I think is a great start on things that we have to do. Take us into the future. I mean, what's next? We got 1200, 1205. Are you looking further down the road, or at least what the next conversation is going to be?
Yeah, so we're going to be wrapping up development of standard 1200 and 1205. It looks like summer of 2021, which will then allow it to be incorporated into the 2024 I codes.
Okay.
So that'll be certainly a huge development. We're actually on the books for the next standard in the series, which will be actually on MEP systems, energy efficiency, and water conservation. So I think we'll have some interesting discussion around connections between modules for mechanical, electrical, and plumbing systems.
Right.
I think we'll also have some discussion around mate lines, for energy efficiency, around vapor barriers, insulation, sort of all of those pieces. So I think that will certainly be huge help moving forward. I think we'll probably also see an increased level of international collaboration. For viewers in Canada, CSA is actually developing standards around offsite construction. So I think we're going to continue to have the conversation around harmonizing those standards. There are activities going on in Australia as well around offsite construction, and so really having those conversations. Really trying to harmonize there. And I think, we'll continue to see the growth in offsite construction. I mean, affordable housing issues aren't going away. Workforce issues aren't going away. And so, we're really going to need to address those. And then, specifically from the Code Council perspective, you mentioned the FAQ document that we put out just recently, but we'll be providing a host of additional resources for code officials and others, within the offsite construction industry, including education courses, white papers, and other resources that can really help move things forward.
Yeah, and you know what? I'm glad you said that about looking at the energy efficiency, the indoor air quality, air tightness, because offsite construction does allow us to really pay attention to those details in a way that you can't pay attention really on site. And and I think that's a really big thing right now, especially with everything happening in the world. Everybody's talking about air quality these days, right? And we're all spending so much more time in our homes. We realize what we like, what we don't like, things of that nature. And if they're listening to us, 5 days a week, they're finding a bunch of things that they didn't know, which I didn't know. So that's great that that's going to be on the docket. And I'm hoping it's to improve energy efficiency, improve air indoor quality, and all that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we do have the International Energy Conservation Code, which covers requirements for energy efficiency. We also have the International Plumbing Code, which includes plumbing-related issues. But again, they're not necessarily designed for easy use within the offsite construction industry. And so, again, hopefully providing some consistency. But as you mentioned, one of the benefits of offsite construction is you have more control over the process. And so, at the end of the day, hopefully you get, more quality out of, offsite construction. And, the standard is really intended to really demonstrate that and provide a pathway to make sure that, we can capture those benefits.
Sure. And since we have a global audience, what can we do from an audience on this end looking in to help? I mean, does it help if we submit ideas for code changes? Is that what you want? Do you want people to put their input in, and how does one go and do that?
Yeah, so certainly participation in the code development process is really key. I mean, we learn our lessons from, folks on the ground who are implementing the codes and trying to comply with them. So if there are, any particular issues that you've come across, would certainly recommend participation in the code development process. I think I mentioned standard 1200 and 1205 have gone through their first public review. And so we've collected comments, from a variety of different folks. I think we've gotten close to 200 comments. And so now the committee is actually going through and, trying to address all of those comments. We will go out to a second public review where folks will have another opportunity to make sure that, we're meeting the needs of the industry. And so, certainly be on the lookout for that. And again, provide feedback, make sure that we're getting it right, and addressing, the issues that you come across. And then, certainly moving forward, engaging with state and local officials. As standard 1200 and 1205 come out, jurisdictions will have the opportunity to adopt them and support the offsite construction process. And so hearing from manufacturers and designers on the ground that it would be a huge help for them to have these standards in place, I think would be a very worthwhile effort, and really help the industry and communities really move forward with offsite construction.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. So if everybody has noticed, we've been actually putting the website and the links to all of these in the ticker below. So, please, if you missed any of this, you can always go back and find the information on our YouTube channel. So this lives forever, and on LinkedIn and Facebook. So wherever you're watching from today. So Henry Mickelberg had a follow-up here. He said the most pragmatic way it tends to work is the client sets their requirements, third-party specialist, offsite assessor produces and agrees a Q&A methodology. The third-party assessor manages the product and compliance. So, yeah, for sure. For sure.
Yeah, and that's generally how it works in the states that allow third party. The state sort of sets up the parameters, but the third party goes in and works with the manufacturer to make sure that they have the quality assurance processes in place, the inspection protocols, sort of all of that process.
Right. Love it.
Because frankly, it's not practical for most factories that have projects sort of all over the country for the local jurisdiction to send someone every time there's a project in jurisdiction. And so really relying on a third party system really creates that efficiency. And so we're certainly where practical looking to the third party process to make sure that everything's up to speed.
Sure. And what about the code officials? How do they get up to speed on this stuff? You have these code changes. How are they mandated to understand and learn this stuff?
Yeah, so I think there's a few different things. Certainly as a jurisdiction goes to update its code, typically we'd like to see an education and training process there to make sure both the code official and the local design community really understands what are the requirements within the code. In many states, code officials are actually required to be certified. And so we'll look to potentially include some of the requirements in the standards and any code updates, in that certification process. And then, as I mentioned, ICC will certainly continue to put out resources. The FAQ document is the first one, but we'll be doing a series of education courses, really diving into initially sort of, what is offsite construction and what's the difference between, open and closed and all of that. But then really getting into roles and responsibilities. So, what is the role of the local code official, and what is the role of, a state program, and, how do third parties operate in that space?
Sure. Well, some states, they have two requirements. They have PFS or NTA, right? And then they have their own in-state inspection review as well, like Rhode Island. Rhode Island has 2 inspections. So they don't just accept what NTA delivers. So, I mean, it gets hard sometimes.
Yeah, and that that's why we're looking at standard 1205 is hopefully provide some consistency there, that folks feel comfortable they're getting the safety and the approvals they need, but not overly burdening the industry. Sure.
Well, Ryan, listen, I appreciate it. And Ryan, so everybody can find more, I think the best place to go is iccsafe.org/offsite. Is that the accurate?
Yep.
And where we'll find it. That's also where you can find the facts on offsite construction report that was just put out there. In fact, I'm looking for my ticker right there. It is. Ryan, this has been insightful, and I'm really happy that you're working with this. I see Tom Hardiman in the banner there as well in the comments back and forth. So Tom Hardiman, if you're listening, we appreciate all the work that MBI is doing on behalf of everybody in the offsite world as well. So hopefully, Ryan, we can have you on again next year sometime talking about the new codes that are coming up.
Sounds great.
In the favor of offsite construction.
Yeah, no, definitely appreciate that. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, and if you have any surveys or you want to get something out that you have questions on, let us know. Be more than happy to support that, and I think our global audience would be as well, willing to put their input in for sure.
Great. Yeah, as I mentioned, the National Institute of Building Sciences Offsite Construction Council has been doing surveys in the past. I think they're looking to do another one. So once that comes up, certainly I'll let you know.
Yeah, I love it. So just so you know, I mean, there's a lot of people. We got Sean St. Amour, Ryan Smith from ModX, Sean McStay is with us, Carolina Albano. We got some influencers out here that, have their own podcasts and talk about this stuff all the time. Rick Hawkins, so Martin Crispin, Alina Tappa. So listen, everybody, we really appreciate you tuning in today. This is a big, big deal that we are starting to implement new codes into the ICC in favor of offsite construction to help simplify our process, move it forward so we can build better and healthier homes and all kinds of properties, multifamily and commercial. So I love it. Ryan, thank you so much for your time today.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I love it. And if you have anything else, just let us know and we'll bring you back on. So there you go, everybody. I'm Dave Cooper. Ryan, you hold tight until after the outro. We will see you tomorrow on Building Modular with Jennifer Cooper. And we have some architects joining us tomorrow from the west side of the state in Dallas. Get this, Ryan. They actually wanted to find a better way to build. They did some work in a factory in Virginia. They still couldn't find anything that they wanted for the quality. They went back to Dallas. They built their own factory. Now we have 2 architects that built their own factory, learned by doing. So it's going to be a great conversation. That's tomorrow at 1 p.m., everyone. I'm Dave Cooper, Ryan Colker from the ICC. Thank you, Ryan. We'll see you next time. Bye, everyone.